Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our webinar. I see folks are rolling in, so welcome. We'll wait for a few more folks to join us, and then we will be kicking off. So today we are talking about automating the contracting process. So if that's the webinar that you're anticipating, you're in the right spot. Let's give it a few more seconds for more folks to join us, and then of course we will begin. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Paul Branch. For those that don't know me, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at World Commerce and Contracting. We've got a spectacular session for you today. I often say that, but I really mean it. I'm really excited about what we've got to share today. Some really spectacular stuff. It will all be revealed to you in a second. Automating the contracting process. A simple title, but as I say, some really interesting elements associated with it. So, a few housekeeping things before we start. You will notice that you've joined with your lines muted. We are recording this session and it will be available to you for replay. And yes, you will get a copy of the slides. So both of those assets will be made available so that you can listen to it again, or also our colleagues who are listening to this on the replay will have the opportunity to make use of that resource then. The other thing with questions though is you notice the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen here. We really encourage you to ask questions. We'll try and get to those questions as we run through the session, and there will be an opportunity for us to ask any other questions, the meatier questions maybe. We've got a slot at the end for some Q&A time. So without further ado then, let me introduce the two guests that we have on our panel today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Jason Donner from BP. Jason is head of IT infrastructure sourcing at BP. And Jason's our practitioner today. So he's got some really interesting, exciting things to share what BP has been about. So when we get to his session, please take advantage of the opportunity to get up close and personal with a practitioner to really understand the sort of things that Jason's been up to and how he's approached it. Really interesting stuff. Before we do that, though, I'd like to introduce you to Dan Goldenblatt. Dan is representing App Orchid Contract AI, our partner for today, and Dan is Vice President of Business Development. So, gentlemen, welcome to the stage today.
Great to be here.
Great. And Dan, if you'd like to kick off, tell us a little bit more about App Orchid, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So App Orchid is a 6-and-a-bit-year-old company located in Silicon Valley in the East Bay. We're a AI platform company, and that's how we were founded. And we have an AI platform that has been licensed to several Fortune 1000 companies who have been developing AI applications using the platform. We've been experiencing a very bullish growth, second fastest growing company in Silicon Valley in 2019, 14th in the US, over 120, I think we're already 140 employees. And Contract AI is actually our first solution that is a standalone solution based on the platform. And I'm going to leave that to Jason to talk more about that. But one of the advantages of working with us is that our customers who start off with, who choose to start off with Contract AI, they work with a company that actually can bring to the table an entire AI platform, enterprise platform capabilities. So there's a lot of opportunities for me doing upsell opportunities, but also a lot of opportunities for our partners and customers to work with us on different applications. We're very proud to have been recognized by the World Commerce and Contracting Organization as the Outstanding Service Provider Award just last week. And, we've been recognized by Red Herring, Gartner, EY, and other recognitions by all kinds of organizations for the achievements that we've been getting over the years. So I'm really happy about this opportunity. Very happy that Jason, a key partner, BP has been a key partner of ours with Contract AI. And he'll be giving the demo, and I'll be happy to take any questions that come my way at the end. So thank you very much for your interest and participation.
Thank you, Dan, and again, congratulations on that Innovation and Excellence Award.
Thank you very much. And just before handing it over to Jason, a quick poll that we wanted to take, and that's where are you in the contract lifecycle management journey? You should be getting, yep, there it is. I just got it. Not using a CLM tool at all, utilizing a CLM tool with very little automation, using a CLM tool with a high degree of automation, and leveraging a CLM tool with AI. If you can all please just give us your answer on that, and I think Paul will immediately be able to tell us the results of that poll. So thank you very much, and handing it over.
Thank you. So let's take a quick look then. Tali, maybe we'll give folks a couple more seconds just to complete their responses. And now let's take a look at the results. We were talking a little bit earlier about what the results would actually look like. So it will be interesting to see if it reflects our expectation. So clearly, I'll be honest, this has taken us further on that journey than I was anticipating. The 45% of the folks on the call today are using a CLM tool, but with little automation. A number have a tool with higher degree of automation, but only 6% are utilizing a tool with artificial intelligence. Now that creates for us, I think, a huge opportunity. You're about to hear how a major corporation has successfully deployed artificial intelligence into their commercial and contract management infrastructure. So I think we've got a lot to learn. Guys, any observation from the results in front of you?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the 6% are my colleagues actually working at BP.
Quite possibly. Where I was going, I was anticipating a bigger swing towards the not actually using a CLM tool. I think possibly the audience that we have today have been prepped to expect something in the automation space and have joined accordingly. Yeah.
No, I think you was talking about that at the start, Paul, with your expectations being down, like the just starting CLM or not quite into using CLM. So it was kind of aligned with where I thought people would be. I think the journey has just started with people to start looking at CLM tools and looking at kind of like the basic features of contract authoring or contract analytics. So
Sure.
it's not too surprising. It was good to see some numbers there in highly automating or in the AI space as well.
Totally. So Jason, why don't you go for it and tell us what you've been doing in BP?
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate this opportunity, Paul. So thanks for inviting me along to talk to you today about BP's journey in automating the contracting process. I'm going to start off with just a few slides to set some context about who I am, where I'm from, and what kind of started this journey for BP just over about 18 months ago. Just to touch on BP as an organization, hopefully everyone's aware of who BP are, but you might not know that we are transitioning from an oil company into an energy company. And so you'll see on the screen here a number of different strategic objectives that we've set out that we are looking to achieve by 2030, which is really supporting the global view of becoming less reliant on oil. You can find this on the bp.com site. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I just wanted to recognize that we are on that journey. And then within BP, so I started BP in 2013 within procurement. My background is IT procurement. I've been in IT procurement for about 20 years. And within BP, we have a supply chain with over 72,000 suppliers, providing either products or services that go end-to-end across the organization, from the origination of drilling for oil or renewable energies through the supply chain, all the way up through retail sites and providing the end product. Me specifically, I've not been in the production side. I'm more in the IT products and services side. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit in terms of my use case. So back in 2015, within the IT organization, we went on a cloud-first journey. So BP decided to transform the way that we provided our IT services across workplace, network, and platform services. And so if you think back to 2015, we had mega data centers around the world providing all of our applications out to our business. And in support of that, we had very few global outsourcing contracts. These were the big 3,000-page contracts, long-term commitments, 5 to 7 years. They were hundreds of millions of dollars in value. They consisted of additional large capital projects to do things like end of service life, storage refresh, network refreshes, and it was all run from a centralized IT organization. But obviously that created a lot of fixed assets for BP. It was very slow to get applications up and running, and applications soon became out of date because of trying to keep up with modern up-to-date patching or versions was just too expensive to transition to. So we went through this cloud transformation program where we migrated our applications out to the cloud. And so we started to use our IaaS platform. So we went with a dual cloud strategy with Amazon and Azure. And then we also went out and looked at different platforms that we could build upon, things like ServiceNow and Salesforce. And we made commitments into those platforms to allow applications to build their products or workflows or their solutions much quicker. And then we also looked at leveraging SaaS. And that's where the problem kind of hit me and my team, because in this old world of few global outsourcing contracts, we had a team set up in order to manage the governance of those contracts and to manage renewals that typically came every 5 years or so. And so this future state, suddenly we went from those few global contracts into hundreds of new service contracts. The amount of SaaS deals just every week doubled in volume. People are looking at different little companies that are providing solutions for $50,000, for $100,000, for $200,000, and that volume was hard to keep up with. Those contracts typically were a year in length, or maybe you'd get some 2-year renewals. So not only were there more of them, they renewed much quicker. So then the volumes were out of control after the first year. And those from a benefits perspective, they were good because it gave more agility to the business. They were OpEx driven. They were self-service, so the business were able to quickly turn servers or applications on and off. And they were pay as you go. So if you didn't use them, then you didn't pay for them, which is very different to the old kind of model where we've got all of those fixed assets that we're having to pay for. So the end solution was the right way to go for BP, but my organization as procurement, we never right-sized through that journey. So we were a support function to IT, and so we got to a point where we didn't have the resources to support the process. And so everybody should be familiar with this dilemma that we have in procurement as an organization, supporting organization. And if you think about this process going iteratively across hundreds of contracts, then you can see how quickly it can get out of control. But as I said, you should all be familiar with, we get a business request for somebody to go out and buy a SaaS solution. And we follow the procurement process where we send out the MSA or the services agreement along with our RFP. The suppliers respond, and typically the things that we look at is, well, what's their service levels, what's their pricing, we'll do some presentations, and very quickly people will draw conclusions as to the supplier that they want to go with. And to that point, typically the business will drive you to, I love this SaaS company. I just want to get on with it. I can't wait for 3-4 months for you guys to get the process or the contract in place. We just need to get this done. And they go and get their finance approval. And then the next thing we know, procurement are trying to negotiate a contract that has a price point, but it also has a services agreement that's been redlined that doesn't conform to our requirements, or it's heavily redlined to the point that the risk we feel is inappropriate. And so we go through this dance of 1, 2, 3 months of time where we have conference calls, we have emails back and forth, we have face-to-face negotiations, and we're trying to get that contract back to where we started. But the issue is the suppliers, one, he's probably already knows he's been selected because there's been a tip of the hat. But secondly, their position is, we've given you a price based on a red line document that we submitted with our response. So if you want to move back on those legal positions, then your price is going to go up. And then what that does is it makes that price then uncompetitive to the other bids. And of course, the business don't want to do that. So what ends up happening is we accept the risk. And so we accept the risk in order to keep the price. And then after 3 months, and by the way, on average, our SaaS contracts were taking about 3 months to complete, start to finish. But we get to the end where we're signing the contract and the business aren't particularly happy because it's taken them 3 months to get their service. Procurement aren't particularly happy because we felt that we've conceded in order to get the contract done. And the supplier is somewhat happy because finally they've got an agreement in place. And so I'm seeing this happen over and over again with every contract. I've got a team of 20 people in the US and the UK that are all doing this same kind of dance, I'd call it, with a supplier. And we've also got a team that's based in Malaysia that they're also doing this same process. And I was actually at the before WCC was the new name, the IACCM conference back in 2018, and it was in Toronto. And I remember the panelist conversation, and it was all about how do we bring automation into procurement and into IT. And I think the discussion was, hypothetically, do we see that machines would talk to each other in the future in order to negotiate contracts and to pay bills? And that just got me thinking to, I'm in IT sourcing. I'm doing all these contracts for new innovative SaaS solutions for the business to find oil, to analyze sand samples, and to predict maintenance on our rigs. And I'm thinking, why aren't we doing that? Why don't we have any kind of intelligence within procurement that helps us do our job, helps us manage our processes and speeds up and automates those transactions? And so my what if statement was kind of like, well, what if we could reduce our time from 90 days to 14 days? What impact would that have, not just on me and my team, but on the business as well? Because a lot of what we're buying is leading innovative solutions in order to make a competitive advantage for BP. So if I take 3 months to do that, to negotiate that contract, that's time that we've lost that our competitors could potentially put in the same types of solutions. Also, from a supplier perspective, I'm thinking, the amount of cost it must take them for 3 months to support a negotiation with legal support, sales support, other administration costs, travel costs. That's huge. So there must be some concessions that we're willing to make in order to get to a point where we can speed up the process. Obviously, along that is eliminating the red line process, which is painful. I've been through it for 20 years, and as much as there's some you want to win your procurement, you want to get the best result. Actually, when you think about it, the same discussions you're having with every vendor is similar, and it was how do we take that information and present it back in a way that we can build a solution in order for machines to do that for us. And then again, it's a cost thing, right? So eliminating the cost of legal support and the contracting support. And so we went through a process where we went to market. We looked at different, we looked at a lot of different solutions that existed in the marketplace. And there are a lot of CLM tools. There's hundreds of CLM tools. There's some ones that are really good. They're really good in analytics, or they're really good in contract authoring. But I didn't find anything that really did what I wanted to do, and that was to automate contracting. I want to remove resources or the need for physical interaction in that process. And so what I would say at best is what I found in the market was tools that would digitize the process. And what I mean by that is there were tools that you could create templates, you could create libraries, you could share documents with the supplier that the document could amend, and then you can track and audit the amendments through that process. But it was the same, what I would say, antiquated procurement process that we were digitizing. And I wanted to look at this in a little bit of a different way. And that was to throw everything out the window in terms of traditional procurement and say, how can we make this go away? I knew the technology exists because I was buying AI for BP in different areas. I knew the data exists because I've been doing it for 20 years. I know we've got we've got repositories full of contracts, so the data's there. I can't get to it in a sensible way that I can do anything with it. But as I said, the applications didn't. And so I got introduced with App Orchid through, I was contracting them to do another piece of work within our claims department. And when I was talking to them about what they do, I put this kind of what is statement to them. And at the time, Krishna Kumar, who was the founder of App Orchid, said, I think we can help you. So everybody knows in procurement, you don't have a budget, right? You have lots of budgets to spend, but you don't have one yourself. So we were able to negotiate a contract together where basically we co-developed this solution. It doesn't exist. It didn't exist. They have a platform, an AI platform, but we needed to build on top of that a solution that was going to meet the objectives that we were setting. So in exchange for the use of their platform and for them to develop the solution, BP gave them our IP from a process and history perspective, in order for them to build a product that they could then market and sell to their customers. So
Jason,
really,
we're getting lots of questions coming in already. One question that multiple folks have already asked is, how did you go about getting your stakeholders engaged? Was there support within BP to do this, or was this a Jason running the flag and taking flack?
It started off with nobody's getting my vision here, and so honestly, there was some headbanging, like to the point I was thinking, am I doing something wrong here? But I would say, if I take legal, for example, legal were very skeptical. They were very kind of like, if there's tools that could do this in the market, we would know about it, because there's all kinds of legal conferences and legal discussions, and so we just don't see it. And then I would say at the beginning it was tough. It was a tough sell. People weren't getting the concept, and so it was just the Jason show. I had 2 of my team working with me, and the 3 of us worked with App Orchid in order to start building out the vision. We used sketches on boards. We just it was a complete whiteboard, right? How do we want this to work? What do we think we should do, and how should we do it? And then how do we build a product to wrap around that? I think once we got to a point where we'd gone from a whiteboard to a presentation to an actual sandbox, and we were able to show people some of the work that we'd developed, then we started to get a lot more interest. At that point, legal started getting on board. They couldn't, they were actually, wow, we can't believe you've done this. This is really good. Our other stakeholders, our business partners, procurement, the wider procurement organization, they started to see, I think once they could see it and touch it, they started to get on board and understand it. I think the concept, and we'll talk about it in just a second, but the concept of how it works was another issue, right? So the first issue was, how do we get people on board to believe there's a product that will automate the process? Secondly, is the way the concept works is we have to be okay to put forward our positions to a supplier it goes away from that poker. It's like playing poker, right? It's from hiding your hand to literally just showing everybody and saying, I'm okay to play you at this game, and you can see the cards that I have. And so we were able to use the technology to help get through that barrier as well. And I'll go through that example with insurance that we had as we get into the demo. So what we built with App Orchid was, as I said, it was ground up, right? So it's not like we took a solution that existed and tried to modify it and configure it. We took a plain piece of paper and we said, this is BP's ecosystem. We use Ariba today. That's our contract management. It's our catalog. It's how people engage with procurement in order to make a purchase. And we've got DocuSign. We use DocuSign in order to execute a contract. It's all electronic, and those 2 things work together. And so what we wanted to do, we wanted to be conscious that we want to build into that and around that ecosystem. And so we ended up coming up with 3 different products. The first product is what we call Contract Analyzer. In this, it's called Contract Analyzer Analysis and Build App. But essentially, that was the smarts. That was the technology that we used to feed in all of our signed contracts. So we fed it hundreds of contracts, and the way that it displays data is unique, I think, in the market. And we were able to suddenly start to see the changes in those contracts that we'd signed previously, and the system will group those changes too. So it uses, I'm not the technology person, so but it uses technology in order to understand the types of changes and the severity of changes based on language and other things. And so it presented that data back to us in a way that it was kind of like, the most interesting thing that I realized, Paul, was 75% of contract changes, maybe a little bit high, maybe 50% of contract changes that we made has 0 value, right? 0 value. You're talking about a lawyer A and a lawyer B who wants to write a particular word differently, or they went to a different law school and therefore they have a different way of writing things. It was amazing how many changes we made just because they wanted to restructure the sentence. But the sentence wasn't restructured in a way I would say it made a commercial or legal difference. It was just a way of writing.
And that's certainly consistent with our finding as a result of the surveys that we do too. There's a lot of wasted energy. So your 90 down to 14 may sound a huge step forward, but it's actually quite achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was other things like there was changes in there. You would not believe that we said, who signed that off? How did that get, how did that get done? The legal risk that we pose because we've got no controls around the changes that people make within the team. When if you're a procurement manager and you have the authority to sign contracts, when you get your contracts, if you're getting 10, 15 contracts a week, I'm pretty sure you're not reading word for word every contract, right? So when we looked at some of these, it was like, you go to things like indemnification, limit of liability, service, price. We started to see some changes in force majeure that we were like, well, why would you change force majeure? And then when we looked at the changes, we were we were shocked. And so we use that to help educate and train people. Actually, it was kind of like, obviously people aren't really sure of what force majeure is about and what they can change. But anyway, the analysis app and the build app was really the intelligence that allowed us to see what we've done over the past 18 months. And then also we use that data then to set the future and say, there are some changes we made that are actually okay, and we've accepted them. And insurance is a good example of that, where our insurance limit, let's just say, for example, was $5 million. And that's our base. And, I looked at all the data and I went to our insurance group and I said, look, we want to offer $1 million, $3 million, and $5 million, and give the supplier the choice. And they were like, well, you can't do that. No. We at 5 million, that's the requirement. That's what we have. That's what we need. And I'm like, well, here's the data. I can show you over, a few hundred contracts, only 5-10% of those contracts have a $5 million policy. All these others are 1, 3, or somewhere in between. They're like, well, they must have gone through the process. So what process is that? Well, if you want a deviation, you have to contact us and request a deviation. So, okay, so then if I request a deviation, what happens? Well, we approve it. It's like, oh, so there was no repository of those deviations, and there was no real logic between that other than just somebody's ticking the box to say, yep, I'm approving that deviation. And so with that data, again, we were able to onboard them as a stakeholder to say, now, how do we work together? Because now I can control those limits. I can say, well, actually, 1 is too low, right? We need 2, 3, or 4. But I can report that and give you that information back so that now if we self-insure or if we need to put in an insurance policy for any reason, you now have the data to do that. Whereas previously, we didn't, and we wouldn't know where we had those gaps. So we also then built a procurement app, which is really a contract authoring tool. It's a way that we build our contracts that we send out to our suppliers. It tracks the dashboard in terms of allows people to see where their deals are at and what changes have been made. And then I'm speeding up a little bit because I want to get to the demo. The Supplier App, which we call the collaboration app, that's what the vendor comes into. That is the key component that the vendor gets access to, that they come in and negotiate their own contract. It has zero touch from BP. They have options, they have points that they can use in order to make the changes that they want to make. And they go through from review to execution. When they come out of that app, if they've got to a point where they've got an agreement on all their clauses and they've got points and they're okay, that will go straight into DocuSign and get executed as an agreement. And if you think about the RFP process, what we're getting to now is rather than me going out to RFP where people redline a contract and then give me a price and then we look at the red lines later on, they have to get through contract collaboration tool and execute their contract before they submit their price to me. And that way, I know their price is their price. And I know that they've gone within the boundaries I've set within contract AI. And also, I now have an ability to assess their price based on their contract, because now I've got a scoring system that gives me a high, medium, or low score on the contract. So their price might be $10 per widget, but I'm going to normalize them to $12 because they've picked all the low components of the available options. And obviously, the objectives that we were looking for at the beginning in terms of reducing time by 80%, removing red lines, mitigating contract risk, which is huge, minimizing the contract friction, we have achieved through our proof of concept. So we've ran the product's live, we ran a proof of concept. It actually went from 92 days to 8 days. So we blew the 14-day time frame, and actually 8 days was what we were seeing on average, the contracts being signed up through this product. And then just in terms of where we are now, we're rolling that out to different categories. So obviously we rolled it out for software as a service. We're now rolling that out to our professional services and to a couple of other areas in our downstream organization.
Fantastic stuff, Jason. I think what our folks would really like to see is they'd like to see the tool in action. So now would be a great time, I think, to start up our demonstration. If you could,
yep,
if you could bring that up, that would be fantastic. The wonders of modern technology. How important it is to secure access. There we go. Excellent. Back to you, Jason.
Heartbeat moment. Is it going to work? So what I'm going to show you first is I'm going to run through Contract Analyzer. This is and also the Supplier App, which is the authoring tool. And so within Analyzer, there's a number of different screens that you can look at. This is a contracts overview, so it's a dashboard that shows you. This is a demo, obviously. So we've only got 10 contracts in this particular demo. It puts them into the risk categories based on the exceptions that or the changes that they've made. So you can see these contracts are the high risk, and you've got one low risk. So when people coming in after that contract signed, if they want to use that supplier for somebody else, they can very easily see what risk factor those suppliers represent. And then it also gives you data around which are the highest risk contracts, how many changes were made within those contracts, which risk clauses were the most modified, which sub-clauses even, and then which are the highest risk suppliers. And this is all interactive, so you can select on here. It'll ping up the actual contract with a supplier, and you can dive into the changes. You'll see that in a different screen.
So Jason, that's really just that dashboard is really impressive. How much energy, though, these things just don't pop out of the sky. How much energy have you had to put in to get it to look that good and to be that feature rich?
So so I like to, we work in an agile way now at BP, and so through a iterative DevOps kind of way, we're constantly updating it, right? And App Orchid are working in that same manner. Clearly, it's taken us 18 months because there's not a point in time that I would say App Orchid is done, right? The contract AI is not done. And I think you'll find that it's been built with a BP kind of twist on it, but not BP specifically. It's really my twist, right? It's really me as a procurement practitioner, being in procurement for the past 25 years, knowing what we as an organization or as a group of SMEs want out of the system. But I think the good news is, if we take this to other clients, or if App Orchid take this to other clients, there's going to be a product council, right? There's going to be a way that we take on board changes that other people bring to the party. Because I'm sure there's other practitioners that have better ideas or different ideas to me that will help to improve on that.
Cool. Okay, keep going. Good stuff.
This is just a repository. This is where you can just get to like a Explorer page and find all the contracts, but you can also upload contracts here too. So it's very quick and easy to upload contracts. Once you upload it, it'll do an analysis, and the AI will take over and actually analyze that contract and compare it to the template, and it will produce all of the information around the risk factor, the number of changes. It will pull out certain metadata around the supplier name, the number of clauses, and all things like that. We have the section that is related to the templates. This is where you would put in your template that you want to send out to a supplier. And obviously, you would have a number of these in an organization. Again, this is the proof of concept. We just have one. But the way it works is this is where you set up all of your different options and changes. So if you come into insurance, for example, you'll see here that this is your insurance clause. These are all the sub clauses. And these are the areas where you've got changes, where you've got the blue dotted underline. If you see that, that means there's options. So if you click on that, it'll come up and say, when a supplier comes to negotiate, you're offering them $3.5 million as standard with 0 points, no risk. But I want to offer them 3 million, I want to offer them 2.5, and I want to offer them 2 million. And here's the points associated to each of those changes. And here's the risk factor to those changes. Now, AI, the platform itself, once you load in your initial 100, 200, 300 contracts, it will start to present options to you, and it will group those changes and offer you suggestions. But these are all changeable, right? If I don't like that, I can come in and say, I don't want that to be 5 points, I want it to be 7, right? I can say, well, actually, I don't want it to be 3 million, I want it to be 4, right? And so I can make those changes on the fly. I can say, I don't want that to be low risk, I also want that to be medium. And so it's all very user-friendly, it's very self-serving, right? You save that change. You might want to come in and say, this clause got changed by the insurance team, I need to edit it. You can come in and edit it right in the text here, if you want to edit it here. You can delete a section, you can add a new section in. So this really becomes your authoring tool in terms of where you keep all your contract templates and all of the options that you want to offer out. We then have the search database. So now we're able to say, like, if somebody came along and said, do we have GDPR in our contracts? You can say, I don't know, but I can tell you which ones we have GDPR in. Put in GDPR, and straight away it pulls up all the contracts where GDPR is in the contract. And it pulls it up in such a way, it's not the whole contract, it's the specific section, and it'll highlight the areas in which that comes up. And if you want to, you can go and look at more information within that contract and look at all the clauses where GDPR is referenced or where there's cross references into GDPR. You can do that with payment term, you can do it with anything, basically. So the reporting and the search function is really neat. The analytics, when I did mine on insurance, obviously I had hundreds of these, so it doesn't look as impressive as the demo here. Sorry, the demo does not look as impressive, but this is what I took to our insurance group to say, look, this is our baseline here. Our contract says we should have 4 million for employee liability insurance. But if I look at just employee liability insurance, you can see I've got these down here that are all less than the $4 million. And so that was, again, analytics. I was able to help to sell the product, to convince people that it's okay to set these different boundaries. We also have this change analysis overview, which is one of my most favorite components of this analyzer tool. And this tells me all the changes in all the contracts, which ones are the most modified, either suppliers or clauses. And this is where I found, like, coming through here and seeing force majeure in here and going, scratch my head, who changes force majeure? It's a clause that both the supplier and BP, the customer, have a 50-50. It's a win-win, right? And so when you click on it, it shows you the contract type, the section, and then it pulls out you can see a deletion was made here and an ad was made here, blue and red. And as you scroll through, you think pandemics, well, that's a good ad, right? I could actually add that to my template because that's probably that's a good thing. That's a good thing we want to add. As we continue to scroll down, it's like, well, hang on a minute, we've got supplier failure. Who would add supplier failure into force majeure? Suddenly now that means that any supplier failure would be a force majeure event, which means I've got no recourse on service levels or performance or anything else. And we would not see that if we would just presented a contract and said, you need to sign that off, because we wouldn't look at it, right? You wouldn't expect somebody to change it. So we actually use that data to go and do some education and training for the teams that were making these types of changes. So it was again, it was the fact it's able to pull it up so easily and present that data to you that you can use it to improve performance. And so I'm going to just jump from the analyzer. The analyzer I could spend all day on. There's so many cool features. There's so many good things that you can do. I want to flip to the buyer app. This is where we create deals. So you can see these are my 3 deals here. You can see this one's complete. You can see the supplier status, you know, how many times they've viewed it, how many times they've made changes. And on the complete ones, for example, you can view the details. And these two both signed the contract, but I can see the differences. I can see that this supplier here, Stark Industries, have spent 45 points on high-risk items, whereas Wayne Enterprises, they've just done it on low and medium risk. So when you think about those responses coming back with your RFP response, with your pricing, now I can normalize Stark Industries on the premise that they're making some big high-risk changes to the contract. And I can see the percentage of changes here, how many points they've used. These guys have used 30 of 100. These have used 75 of 100. And I can also go in and say, well, what did they change? So I can click on the view contract, and the contract's presented to me where all the clauses are down here on the left, and I don't have to find the changes because they're all highlighted here. So intellectual property, indemnification, billing, insurance, I can just click on that, and it shows me these 2 sections were changed because it's highlighted them. So the speed to get to the data in order for me to understand what changes were made and where they were made, and even the severity. So I can click on here and I can see they selected 2 million, which was my highest risk, whereas I wanted 3.5 million. So again, that data for me is so valuable, certainly not just in the short term, but in the long term as well. So very quickly, I'm going to go into, oh no, that's not what I want to do. I want to go into the collaboration. Okay, what I want to do. Oh, come on.
Whilst you're working the technology, I would encourage folks to ask questions as we go using the Q&A tab at the bottom. We have some great questions lined up already, which we will absolutely get to. Jason, if we've got maybe 10 minutes left, so if we need to, we can go straight into the Q&A slot if that works better.
Yeah, I think I can do it via this app, right? So what the supplier sees is very similar view to this, right? And so they will see they've been allotted 100 points, and these are all the sections down the left. So what we tried to do when we built this app was make it very intuitive and easy to use. So rather than presenting a Word document or a PDF with 100 pages, we've provided sections, and every section we track how much they've read of that section and the changes that they can make. And there's some cool features in here, like as I said, if you come in, you'll see the areas that are underlined in blue dotted letters, in blue dotted line. That's where changes are open, and you can come in and pick. You can change the options that you have here, and it'll change the points that you have. We also have like all of our definitions. We wanted to remove the ability to print the document. As much as legal want to print it, we don't want to print it because we want low carbon, save the planet, don't want to waste the paper. So we said, well, why do they print it off? Because they cross-reference the definitions to the document. So every definition you hover over, you'll see the definition come up. And that way we were able to then take away the need to print off the document. And we set that out in a module form. So every section, every clause is a different page. So again, if you want to bring another area of the business in and say, just look at billing and payment, they can look at billing and payment, and this is all they have to see.
So this plays neatly into a question that Mohammed asked about how to do, subcontractor management. Have you found that this sort of approach, where you can give the control to the supplier, is a component part of that speeding up the process? Have you found that giving the technology to the supplier has been an enabler in that regard?
The suppliers love it. The first supplier that we actually took this out to engaged with App Orchid and said, we want to bring that into our own environment and use it with our own clients. And so we were, that was in the early presentations I did at SIG and IACCM just a year ago. We hadn't run POCs, and that question came up a lot. So it was so nice to get through the POCs and get that feedback. But the suppliers love it. The speed to market, the fact that you present them with options, and those options, you got to remember, they need to be realistic options. There's no point if you go into this and create a contract template that's platinum and you give them a gold option only, you're not gonna get the benefits. You're not gonna achieve the same results. You need to use that data that you have from all the contracts you've signed previously and make realistic options based on agreements and positions that you've signed off before. Remember, if you've signed them off before and you've done it 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 times, it's appropriate, right? You may not like it, and you may want to hold it and try and get an extra penny or two of the price. But if you think about the time and effort you spend, tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars with suppliers flying in and big conferences and emails and face-to-face negotiations, it does not pay off at all. You want speed of market. You want to get a contract in place that's suitable for the relationship to continue. And the other thing I tell people is I've been in procurement for 25 years, and I've never once been in a position where we're suing the supplier over the legal terms because of whatever service they've provided or not.
Great, really interesting. So a couple of clarification questions, one from Drew. Where are the contracts actually stored? Are they in Ariba or are they in Contract AI?
So you've got the option. We as BP, our strategy is Ariba. Ariba is our contract repository tool, but we do pull contracts from Ariba in order to do the analytics. So effectively, they're also stored in Contract AI. But our single source of truth will always be Ariba.
Gotcha. That's it. That's a really important point. Okay, so some great questions coming in. Daniel asks, does BP expect to develop the use of the CLM tool for post-signing phase, for in-life management, when execution starts and problems arise?
Great question, and I think I've presented a number of other conferences on the post-contract award management, which I'm very familiar with too, and I can give you plenty of recommendations around products for that. Question probably for Dan, not really a BP thing.
So Dan, any thoughts on that one? Do you have any? I think what we've seen is the application certainly in pre-contract activity and supporting the negotiation cycle. Anything? Do you see an application for AI post-award?
Honestly, it's not on our midterm roadmap. We are, we're engaged with a lot of customers and potential customers, and there's just that much that we're focusing on right now, but it's, we'll definitely, and forums like this are exactly where we hear demand from the market and things like that, which we can consider. So
I tell you, one area that I've seen, personally seen application is in obligations extraction, so that you can do obligation extraction, allocation of ownership, and then jeopardy management, so you can manage the obligations in life.
Sure.
First step is obviously understanding what those obligations are, so you can apply technology there. Yeah. So let's keep on going with the questions, though. We could talk about that for hours, but let's not. So this is a question from Rud. We are currently working with a CLM tool. How easy would it be to change from the current supplier by means of transferring all of the data from one system into this one? How easy would that be?
So Dan could probably add a little bit. I mean, we did it from we used Oyster at the time for our contract repository. We FTP'd a humongous zip file, number of zip files over to a safe location with App Orchid, and they ingested those contracts in order to do the analytics. So for me, it was an easy process.
Yeah, and we know how to plug into most CLM systems. So, and one of the guiding principles of App Orchid is not to come and have to replace all your existing systems, but actually to plug into existing systems and to enhance and enrich without the need to rip out and start a whole new implementation process. So, and I'm not going to go into commercials, but working with existing CLM systems and providing the layer of analytics, the fast negotiations and closing capabilities, that's definitely something that App Orchid knows, that Contract AI knows how to do.
Great, thank you, Dan. Some really good questions coming in about risk. Lots of questions. Let me see if I can sort of summarize them into one. One, how does BP define risk? And how do you normalize it across different stakeholders so that everybody is approaching it in the same way?
Good question. And risk is a very broad term to use, right? So I think in the context of how we looked at risk for this was a commercial and legal lens. And so I think you've got to look at each of your clauses independently of each other to understand who the stakeholder is for that particular risk. So if you take insurance, for example, we have an insurance group that owned that particular risk. BP, is self-insured. So that's why our process was a little bit easier, because essentially we weren't ever going out and buying insurance policies in order to meet that $5 million threshold, but we are now able to understand where we have gaps in that threshold. So actually, it gives us a better indication of the risk in the insurance amounts that we have, which we never had before. So I think each clause for me is you're going to have a different stakeholder, whether it's tax, insurance, legal, IT, from a digital security perspective. And you have to work with each of those when you're building your options within the tool. You can't do it in isolation, right? So the point that this was a JSON-driven exercise at the front end, at the point we were able to engage the stakeholders and they could see the value, you do have to have that conversation. And it does, it does take a level of mentality that you have to push them to what's reasonable, because everyone's going to go with that platinum, right? It needs to be this. It needs to be this. Why does it? So where you need that data to show why and where it's not the same, and then kind of get them to a point where you've got them at the place where they're accepting a risk or a level of risk.
To get that right balance between the risks and the costs associated with mitigation.
Yeah. And overall, again, you're in charge of the points and the risk rating, and at the end of it, you're given a contract value, right? Your contract is an A or it's a C-, right? And that's what you can use then to normalize your pricing. And everyone will use a different mechanism for normalization, but at least now you've got something quantitative for the legal contract to include within supplier selection processes.
So we have about 1 minute left. Jason, if you were going to give us 2 nuggets, what are the next 2 top things on your must-dos calendar for 2021?
For 2021, well, that's a funny question, because I'm actually in a new role at BP. I've started a role within digital security, and I'm the IT risk advisor for BP. And so now I'm turning to integrated risk management, and actually looking at how do we create a linkage between all of our third parties, the cyber risk that they present, all of the controls that we have, and the incidents that we see, and bring that into a more integrated risk approach.
And so what a great application of AI. You know,
I know. It's taken that knowledge and the skills that I've developed through that 18 months with App Orchid, and applying it now into a different area within BP.
Very good. Okay, well, with an eye to the time, apologies to those folks who have asked questions that we have been unable to get to today. What we will do is we will take them offline. Dan, Jason, and myself will review those and provide responses back to the folks who asked those questions. It just remains, though, for me to say thank you. To say thank you to you, our audience, for some really great questions and for your attention today. But especially for me to say thank you to Jason. Jason, that was inspirational. Thank you so much. Really interesting set of slides, and that demo was pretty compelling. And Dan, thank you for your partnership, and congratulations again for the Innovation Award.
Thank you very much.
And it just remains for me to say thank you one and all, and do please enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.